Hi, I'm Brita, the questioning quilter, and today I am going to teach you my very own basic beginner cheater binding. Now, this isn't a method that you would use if you're putting a quilt in a quilt show or you're making some sort of heirloom work of art, but if you're making a placemat or a pot holder or simply a lap quilt that you're going to use every day, then stick around. Now, just like any binding, you're going to need strips of fabric 2.5 inches wide, long enough to go all the way around your project, plus a few inches. So unless you have a very small project, you're going to need to join some of these strips. I like to join them at a 45-degree angle so there's less bulk. So just line them up perpendicular to each other. I use the lines on the mat to help me make sure that they're perfectly square. Draw a line, then sew exactly on that line. Now I like to open it up real quick just to be sure that I've sewn it the correct direction, and I have done it wrong in the past. Trim off the extra on the edge of that seam and then the little dog ear. So now we're going to make a little 45-degree crease in this because we're going to cut this at a 45-degree angle and then turn under 1/4 inch. And this is the secret to not having to sew the ends of the binding together. That's what makes it cheating. And then we fold the whole thing in half, wrong sides together. So now we're going to sew the binding to the edge of the quilt. You can see the opening here, but we're not going to sew that just yet. We're going to start a couple of inches down from that opening, and we're going to stitch 1/4 inch from the edge of the quilt to the edge of the binding and go all the way to the corner. Now I'll tip it up and put a little crease at the edge so that I can make a mark 1/4 inch from the end, and then I will sew to exactly that mark. We'll cut the thread and take it out of the machine so you can miter the corner. And to do that, we're going to take that tail and fold it up. Notice how this makes a 45-degree angle on the fabric. So you're going to take that and fold it down square so that the top fold is even with the top of the quilt and the right-hand side is even with the right. And notice you have that extra flap of fabric so you know that it is correct. You will take it back to the machine and start sewing very close to the top and 1/4 inch from the right side. You're just going to keep doing this for all 4 sides of the quilt until we come back to the beginning of the binding where you see the opening. So now we're going to take the end of the binding and we're going to trim it up so that it's about 1/2 inch beyond the far edge of the opening. And now here's the magic. Instead of trying to sew these pieces of binding together, we're just going to tuck the tail of the binding into that opening we made at the beginning of the binding. And once everything's all lined up, all we have to do is stitch along the edge of the quilt. So you can see we're just going to continue that seam straight down, covering that joint and connecting up where the seam began. So take the binding and you can open it up and start flipping it to the back. I will often give it a quick little press at this point. So here's a close-up of flipping that corner to the back. We have that extra fabric, we take it, we turn it, and look at that lovely miter that we have in the front. So now it's to the back. We have to be sure that the binding covers that stitching seam. And to miter the corner, we just tuck that fabric over and fold it into place. So now we just need a way to secure the binding in place while we sew it. Now the first and most obvious way, of course, would be to use straight pins, but I also wanted to share with you a few ideas that I've come up with over the years. You can buy these fabric clips at any quilt store or on the internet. They're quick, they're easy, and you won't accidentally stab yourself. This wash away wonder tape is pretty good. It's like double-sided sticky tape that'll disappear once you wash it. You can also use the standard 1/4 inch fusible web that's iron-on. You iron down one side, take off the tape, and then you press down the other side. It doesn't come out when you wash it, and it adds a little extra body to the binding. Finally, and one of my favorite methods is to use fabric glue. Now, just a few drops along the seam allowance, fold the binding over, and giving a quick press will set the glue. Now, this will wash out, but Because the fabric glue is archival and non-acidic, if you choose not to wash it out, you don't have to worry. It's not going to yellow or stain your fabric over time like some of the white school glues might. To make this even easier, we're going to machine sew it from the front right next to the edge of the binding, kind of like stitch in the ditch. And we're just going to go around the entire perimeter like this. Here's what it looks like when you turn it over. You would, of course, use thread that matched your binding. Here's a close-up, and look how lovely that mitered corner looks. Here's a close-up of that joint. Can you tell that we used a shortcut? So here's my quick and easy beginner binding on the 1-hour Quilt As You Go placemat from last month's video. Please stay well and happy quilting.